Hi everyone, it's Mr. Barden here. This video is going to be all about JSON, the JavaScript Object Notation format for creating objects in JavaScript. Now, you may have, if you're an avid viewer of the channel, may have noticed that, wait, didn't you already do a video about this like 3 or 4 days ago? And wait, where did it go? Well, something went horribly wrong in exporting the video, and like an idiot, I didn't check it in between exporting and uploading. So when it went up, I looked at it and was like, wait, that's not right. So we're just gonna redo it because also, like an idiot, I deleted the stuff to save space on my computer once it had uploaded to YouTube. But live and learn. So we're just gonna go over JSON one more time. Well, one more time for me, probably the first time for you if you're watching this video. So, what is JSON? So JSON, as I mentioned, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So if you've been following along with my coding videos, then you would know that we have a lot of data that we have in our sketches, particularly when we start doing a bunch of things. Maybe you have something on the screen. So for example, I'm just going to stick a circle on my screen. There we are. It's just, boom, a basic circle. You know what? Let's make it pretty. Whoop, whoop. There and there. Okay, and you see there's our purple circle. Cool, wonderful. There we are. So there's a lot of data that goes into this. Let's say we want to control some stuff, so I could be like, let x equal. Let's see, these are all 100. Circle. Oops, circle diameter. Let's make it a little smaller. And we can just go in here and fill in this data. Circle diameter. Heck, we could even add another one here. And we can just do it like this. Like so, we get the same result. I made the circle a little bit smaller. If we wanted to make this maybe a little bit more clearer, we could say like this instead. I just put them all on separate lines, nothing nuts. But we've got these 4 variables here that are being used to draw this circle. Now, where I'm going with this is that, again, computers are very powerful but very stupid, essentially. They're going to take everything extremely literally. So here I've got this ellipse, and you might think that, okay, here is a circle with these properties and we can move and adjust it and do all the things. And visually, that's kind of the case. Maybe instead of circle X and circle Y, here I would do mouse X and mouse Y. And this circle is following the mouse. It looks like this is an entity in the code that is behaving and doing things in a certain way. But this is not what's actually happening. As far as the computer is concerned, what is actually happening is we're just happening to set the fill to whatever's inside of this variable. We're going to look at what's inside of these variables and use that to draw an ellipse. And that's it. The computer does not care that we are kind of grouping all of these together, that we're using, the circle C for circle color for the color of this circle, that we're using this variable D for diameter. The computer doesn't care. These can be named anything. Like if I wanted to change this to potato, go down here, and also potato. Computer doesn't care. These are all separate things that just coincidentally happen to come together to create this instance. We're just updating it every single frame, and that's what makes it look like it's a thing that's moving. what I'm going to introduce to you now is what's called the object notation. So for this, what an object is essentially is just an entity in the code. One way to think about it is just a bunch of different values that are all given labels, and then all of those are then stored in a larger container. So this is in a similar vein right now to variables and arrays and just ways to store and organize data. In an upcoming video that'll probably come out in a few days, I'll be talking about classes of objects, which are a bit more advanced. For right now, we're going to keep it basic, and this video may just seem like a more complicated way to make circles on the screen. The idea is you would use this for other stuff and ways to organize your data, but then when we come in with the classes of objects, then it'll start to become a little bit more complex and a little bit more fun to do things with. So let's go in here. Let's make a rectangle this time instead of an ellipse. So I'm going to do this one completely in the JavaScript notation. So we first have to declare that it exists, and we have to give it a name, just like any variable or any array or any function. We have to give it a unique name. I'm partial to doing things like my rectangle, things just for the basic shapes. So normally, if it was a variable, we would assign it a value, just like we have here. If it was an array, we would type in the square braces and list out the values. But this is an object, so we need the curly braces, like so. And we can just open that up and start typing into there. So this will, again, it's just, we're going to assign it to be this code block, and it's the same curly braces as the functions, the conditionals, the for loop, all those things get in the code. Once we are inside here, again, this is now, my rect is an object. So we just have to give the object various parameters. These parameters can, again, be named whatever you want. And at this point, really, it can be whatever. Essentially, a lot of the rules from before don't really apply. That's very broad. There's still rules, but generally speaking, a lot of the guidelines for variables and stuff we don't have to worry about as much, and I'll show you what I mean by that as we start typing. Don't worry, I just wanted to put a big asterisk by that statement. So for a rectangle, let's think all this. So this object is going to contain all the data we need for a rectangle that isn't currently on the screen. So let's see, the rectangles, we have an X parameter. So we type in the name we want to use, and this can be whatever you want. I'm going to keep it for simple. Simple is better in my opinion. And then colon, whatever we want to type here. So let's just put it at 20. Why not? So again, it's parameter colon value. That's the format for these JSON objects. We separate them with a comma, and you could put them on the same line if you want, but you'll see it, especially when code auto formats, that they just put them on new lines, so it becomes very clear what everything is. So I recommend just putting them all on new lines to begin with. So we have an X parameter, a Y parameter, we have a width, we have a height, and I'll make it a really narrow one. Let's see. Maybe I want to control the color as well, so we'll make that yellow. Why not? Maybe I want to control the color of the outline, so the stroke, and we can make that. I don't know. I'll make that one green, and then the stroke weight, I'll just call it SW, and we'll make that 5, a thick outline. I forgot the comma, it got angry at me. Okay, so I have this object, and again, we are just declaring it like a variable, but then we're giving it these braces for the code block, and then inside, we're just deciding what we want to call each property and what value we want to give it. We have to give it an initial value. And that is our first JSON object. You'll notice, though, that nothing is happening yet. We have to actually do something with these values. So like I said, getting into classes, that will be when things start to maybe become a bit more intuitive, a bit more powerful, and a bit more less like we're doing the same thing in a different way. But I'm going to pull up a rect function to make a rectangle, and we'll just say my rect.x, my rect.y, my rect.width, my rect.height. We have that there. I can go in and say fill with my rect.color. There's that one. Maybe, let's see, unless we had a stroke, my rect., I called it stroke, right? Yeah. And then stroke weight to adjust the thickness of it, my rect.stroke weight. Boom. There we are. And maybe I wanted to just push and pop. Just so these are different things. So what I've got going on right now is I am creating two different shapes on the screen, but I'm doing it two different ways. The first is the purple circle from a little while ago, and that is just using variable values to, make the shape. The next is this yellow and green rectangle, but that is using these JSON values in order to build the scene. So we've got it all up here, and I'm doing this with what is called dot notation. So I want to just stress this because if you're following along for my series of videos for this course, this is not going to go away. This idea of objects and dot notation is going to be present for essentially the rest of the course. In order to find and utilize these values, we have to talk to the object, myRect. We then have dot, the parameter name that we defined in the object. So here we're filling in, the fill with whatever is inside of myRect.c, which is yellow. And we can see that, yes, that is setting the fill to yellow. So again, we could just say it's the object dot the parameter name. And we can just fill it in and utilize it just like a variable at this point with these properties. So we can just say, my rect dot, dot x and y. It's just like a variable. I'm going to make a simple function right here. So function mouse pressed, if you're not familiar with it, is built into P5, and basically it just does whatever you tell it to in the code block one time every time the mouse is clicked. It doesn't appear in the default sketch because it's empty by default. So in here we can just say, well, my rect.x plus. I don't know, my rect.height plus my rect.width minus. I'm just kind of picking some random things just to illustrate that we can utilize, and adjust and do all the same things with variables with these property values up here. And if I click the mouse, you'll see that my rectangle is changing every time I click the mouse. I'm clicking it a bunch of times. Hopefully you can hear some of that in the microphone, but we're going to go how long until it's, there we are. Now it is going in the opposite direction. We're at negative values. But we're just able to look inside of them, utilize them, change them, just like variable values at this point. So that's pretty handy. It just by itself, for me, I like to think of JSON as a handy way to organize a bunch of data. Because now, as far as the computer is concerned, there's all of this data, but it is all attached to this larger object called myRect. And each of these things are independent, and we can add and change and remove all the stuff as we need, but it's all attached to the larger object myRect. Just to illustrate a point here, I can paste this and I will say myrect2. And maybe we'll make this 200. We'll say 300, and we'll leave the rest the same. And I'm just gonna copy, paste, and add a 2 to all of these in order to make a different instance of this, a different object. And maybe we'll change this from yellow and green to red and coral. I like the coral color. We have that right there. So again, we can utilize this and change up these values, organize them in several ways. Again, if you wanted to customize all of these things, you would have to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14 different variables. But now we've just got 2 objects. And if you've noticed, the parameters inside of them can have the same name as other objects. And that's what I kind of meant by a lot of the rules for variable names aren't as prominent as they were before. So what's important is that your outer level objects do not have the same name. If you rewind just a little bit, you'll see that before I added the 2 here, the computer was getting angry with a red error because I had 2 objects with the same name. Because the outer object is what matters, and the computer will look inside of each one, it doesn't care if the inner properties here are the same name or the same value or anything. And again, when we start calling them in the code, you can see that, okay, this is different, so the computer is fine. It's these that are the same, and that's okay because these objects happen to have the same properties. When we get into making classes of objects, this will become a little bit more clear because it'll be a template, so all of the objects will automatically have all the same classes. Okay, so we've done all of that. I mentioned this, I mentioned that, so I think that's just about it. Actually, this intro unit is a little on the simpler side. In the textbook, which I'll put a link to that page in the description of this video, along with this code, I'll add a few helpful comments for you all. You can find, again, all of this information, talking about, again, the dot notation, making JSON objects, a bunch of sketches that go about how to do that. And I just think it's a fairly helpful resource. You can also keep going on and look into more of the classes of objects. That's where this really starts to become very useful and very powerful when we start implementing it like that. You can check that out if you want to figure it out before the next video that I make about that comes into play, or you can check out the videos I've made previously about this. They're just a little bit older. They should be popping up in the stuff up top if I remember to do that, and if I remember to make them line up in the right spot. We will see. But that's going to be it from me from now. So if you have any questions about anything I mentioned, definitely put those down in the comments below. Otherwise, definitely please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, all that YouTube stuff. It is very helpful, but especially consider doing so if you learned something or you enjoyed the video content, as it, like I mentioned, it is very helpful for all the YouTube stats. So I'm going to be ending it here for today. Stay tuned for the following video on classes of objects, and I'll see you all the next time that I see you. Bye. I missed the stop recording button. You got a little extra.